Well, hello, everybody, and welcome back to our continuing coverage of the first annual Texas Monsters and Legends Conference right here in Cibolo, Texas. We are joined by our good friend and cryptozoologist Ryan Edwards, author of Cryptids of the World. How you doing, bud?
Doing good.
Man, you gave a presentation a while ago that was knock out of the park, dude. There's a lot of books. There's a lot of books here. There's a lot of books in this genre, Ryan, but yours is probably the one that I recommend more to anybody when they are trying to step into the world of cryptozoology, and mainly because it's not like a lot of books, a focus on a creature or even research. It's the way I describe it to people. It is a cryptid wiki in the palm of your hand.
Pretty much.
And not everybody has gone through the effort to, I guess, compendium cryptids from literally around the world, and categorize them into like groups, things like that. So, for you to give your presentation earlier was fantastic, man. How did you first start getting into this, and what made you decide to make the compendium to begin with?
Well, pretty much, I was like, always every little kid, love dinosaurs, love animals, things like that. And the mysteries of the natural world was always interesting to me. I was into like UFOs and ghosts and all that stuff.
Yeah.
Then I ran into cryptozoology using that. And with me, like, for my book, Cryptids of the World, I kind of take examples from the past. Like bestiaries. Bestiaries from the medieval age, where they would like have every page dedicated to a lion.
Here's the cockatrice.
Things like that. Yes.
Yeah.
And even animals that don't even exist. So with me, I was like, okay, well, if I do that, but just with cryptids. Like, even if it's just an unknown one that people barely have heard of.
Yeah.
Like, on my presentation, I bring up the Gazika and like certain Congolese dinosaurs that I've seen that you don't even hear about nowadays, because those are only really brought up by the old researchers, people like Bernard Hoovermans, Lauren Coleman. And these are cryptids that, because there's no sightings anymore, you don't hear about them anymore. And even though you don't hear about them anymore, I believe that you should still be educated on it, because there might be lessons to learn from them.
Well, and if anything, it's I guess, the equivalent of a use case, you know, and even to explore the old accounts and compare and contrast them versus modern accounts, especially something like that where there has been a lapse in report for so long. To see a report come out and be able to compare and contrast it to old ones is really interesting and very important, much more than interesting.
Yes, like, and it also brings up like what they brought up earlier, the kind of separation of like how research is done nowadays. Like, if you look at a lot of the old researchers, the Bernard Hoovermans, the Lauren Colemans, it's done differently than how we do it nowadays. And you also kind of see a separation of cryptids. Cryptids back in, like, I like to call it like the early days of cryptozoology, were very flesh and blood based. We're kind of based on folklore. Nowadays, they're more based on like internet creepypastas and ideas created from a modern day oral tradition.
Yeah. And last time you were on the show, we spent quite a bit of time exploring the concept of paranormal trope.
Yeah.
And the idea of how these tropes, like a prime example would be Slender Man, how literally a fiction competition on creepypasta has become such an entrenched part of pop culture that it actually becomes a reflection of being real and starts having sightings.
Yes. And like, also a big thing with me, especially with the cryptids, especially like the old ones, is why aren't there any more sightings? Like, is this a possibility that a creature just went extinct that we'll never even realize existed in the first place? That's like one big thing with me in cryptozoology is conservation based.
Yeah.
Like, okay, we must discover the creature in order to protect it in the first place. Like with Sasquatch. Like, we need to discover it before we protect it. And like,
there are a couple forward-thinking places like Oregon that have made it a protected species.
Yes. And then you even got to worry about, okay, we discovered a creature. Like, I use Sasquatch for the example primarily because, like, okay, we discover it. What's the next step?
Yeah.
Do cryptozoologists still research it? Do zoologists come in and take over?
Yeah. Do we have a Senate panel hearing?
Yeah.
You know, like, what is the next step then? And it's interesting because I run in a lot of these communities, as you know, and in the UFO UAP community, that has been a big part of discussion here in the last couple of years is, okay, if, then what?
Yes.
You know, and
how do we,
what is the next step? Who is the emissary?
Yes.
You know?
Who's going to represent the species? Because you have to have someone to represent.
Yeah, exactly.
Take, for instance, Sasquatch. If it was discovered, do all the cryptozoologists give over their evidence to some zoologists and primatologists? Do they keep on researching the animal and know, okay, it's real now, let's start conservation efforts? What's the next step of discovery?
Well, yeah, and I mean, especially of the fact of any protected species, you got to know the number population in order to protect it, in order to know what means you have to go through to protect it. You got to know the standing population of what you're trying to protect, its home range, everything else. So, yeah, I mean, like you said, just finding Bigfoot is literally the tip of that iceberg. Like, there is so much more underneath the water surface right there.
Yes. It's like, because I've always seen, of course, cryptozoology is a science of unknown species.
Sure.
But I see it as the first step to zoology.
Yeah.
Like, we must look for the creature in order to discover it.
Absolutely.
And a lot of times, a lot of these cryptozoologists, we look at the old traditions, we look at the stories, and we're like, okay, like, look at the okapi, look at the giant panda. The indigenous people were already talking about it before discovery was made.
Yeah.
So if we just take it as stories...
Lowland gorilla.
Yes.
Yeah.
If we just take it as stories, we'll never have that discovery. It's a cryptozoologist's job to look into that and be like, okay, let's look at the plausibility. Let's go discover that creature. And then the next step will be true zoology.
Yeah, well, and you know, once again, as we've had the conversation before, we had the conversation with Greg Lawson a while ago, the idea of not allowing the evidence, not allowing the points of datum, because it may go against not even the line that science is towing, but the current known science. Just because it's stands against the current known science doesn't mean it's not.
Yes. Like, I always bring this up when people bring up the paranormal. Supernatural is just what's beyond the normal.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean it's not science. It's a science that is unknown.
Yeah. Well, and that's just it. You know, once again, we get very carried away with all the alphabets, UFO, UAP, paranormal, everything else.
Yeah.
We tie paranormal to, ghosts, all kinds of things, but all it means is not the norm.
Yes.
It means it's outside of the realm of normality, whatever's happening.
Yeah.
So we have the known quantitative of normal. Here's this. Like,
and people bring it up all the time. People make the joke, what is normal nowadays?
Yeah.
So it's like, okay, if we have that saying, then what is paranormal nowadays?
Exactly. And and what's paranormal in 5 years?
Yes.
I mean, heck, in one of the concepts we talked about just this last week with Jared Murphy was the idea of loss of knowledge of society, and I picked up and I held in my hand an SD card, a terabyte SD card. Like, I can hold a lot of data on a terabyte, man.
Yes.
The question is, in 50 years from now, somebody finds that it's full of data. You got an SD card reader? Do you know what an SD card is?
Yes.
There's data locked inside of an 8-track tape. Do you know what an 8-track tape is, and do you know how to play it? Do you have the means by which to get the data off of it?
I think of how many ancient societies and ancient languages that will never be understood just because we don't know how to change it into modern.
Precisely. And like I was saying in our conversation last night, I would challenge you right now to go out anywhere right here in the country. And you live in San Antonio, I'd challenge you to go out with a beam of wood, just a round pole, and find you a master craftsman to turn that into a spiraled column by hand.
Yeah.
50 years ago, you could have found that dude, and probably a competition guy to get a second quote from.
Yes.
50 years. 50 years. Within the span of less than a generation, Ryan, we have lost that.
We've lost
that knowledge is almost gone from our society entirely.
Yep.
So that's exactly how fast it can happen. When you're talking about, we talked about this. All it takes is one grandparent, one parent not carrying the story on. And that whole crop of kids will never know the story, and it will never get passed down.
Yes, and then, like, that's why with me, especially, like, what we talk about quite a bit is the next generation of cryptozoology.
Yeah.
That's why, like, I try to look at researchers that came before me and say, okay, how can I carry on that legacy? How can I carry on that type of research?
Well, and how can you respectfully carry on that research in the modern world? Not to disrespect the other communities that are into that and into the paranormal meets cryptid and everything else. No, nobody is denying any of that. Nobody is denying anybody's experiences, sightings, anything.
Yes.
But when you're talking about carrying on like you're saying, the mantle of the scientists that founded the science of cryptozoology, is that doing the best for it? Or is the hard science that we can prove, that we can find? Because like Ken says all the time, Ken Gerhardt, we can take all the pictures we want. We can bring in all the videos we want. Until there is genetic evidence on the table, science ain't going to take it.
Yep.
They won't take it. Like, you can bring in all the pictures you want. Like, you can bring in pictures of an animal. Cool. You know what we need to do? We need to find that animal.
Yeah, like, that's why, like, one thing people forget a lot is the kind of power scaling of evidence.
Mm-hmm.
You can have all the anecdotal references you want, but that's not going to prove a species exists.
Well, and once again, correlation is not causation.
Yes.
Just because something happens and this happens next to it, like we were saying with Greg Lawson, like, he's a cop.
Yes.
Like, that man is a badge-holding police officer. That is called circumstantial evidence in a court of law, and it does not stand. If you were the dude sitting in the defense chair and that's what they were putting up in court, would you be happy that they're trying to nail you on circumstantial evidence? No.
It's like someone saw you at 2 a.m. doing this, and it's like, that wasn't even me.
Yeah, yeah. There's probably a lot of people out at 3 a.m. doing a lot of things. Doesn't mean that was me doing it.
Yes.
You know? Just because I was not home at 3 a.m. doesn't mean that was me that did it.
Yes.
So, yeah, we have to be really, really careful as this science moves forward in this modern day and age, because we have to try to learn methods of preservation of evidence, because once again, like you look at the court of law, and last month there have been 3 guys exonerated by new DNA evidence. One of them it was literally a month and a half away from execution. 20 years he spent in prison. Had they not been able to examine that old evidence from 20 years ago with new DNA standards, it would have never happened. It would have never happened. So you have to be willing to look at old evidence with new eyes.
Yeah, and also like to look at the court of law.
Yeah.
You have a chain of evidence. It was like,
that's right.
If someone doesn't know what that is for 2 seconds, chain has been broken.
Yeah.
That's no longer evidence now.
Yeah.
So like we have to use that same type of principles.
Yeah, the same protocol.
For zoology, for
absolutely.
Paranormal research.
Yeah. Yeah, and you know, once again, be willing to cast confirmation biases aside. Be willing to. I'm a believer's believer, but I don't think I'm ever going to let my belief cloud my judgment.
Yes, that's like.
Now, granted, that will never remove my belief, my faith,
no, of course not.
Anything like that.
Of course not. Like how we said before, like the confirmation bias. If you go out in the woods with Bigfoot on the brain, you're going to look. You're
probably going to find something Bigfoot.
Yes.
And you really have to wonder and question, because like there's a guy in the San Antonio MUFON group, gonna leave him nameless. You know, pretty sure if you were finding anomalies in the sky behind your house in San Antonio 5 times a week, you'd probably be selling tickets, guy.
Yeah.
That is no longer an anomaly. That is a known quantitative now. If it happens 5 times a week.
Multiple people there to go qualify.
Yeah, feel free to come by on Wednesday. Every Wednesday night for the next month, I guarantee you will see it, you know? And that's the thing, is you've got to be willing to put that aside. You've got to be willing to accept the fact if it's happening every night, it is probably not paranormal.
Yes.
That's normal.
Yes. Like, it's the logic of it. Like,
the paranormal will rarely be normal in your life, you know, like maybe if you live in a haunted house.
Yeah.
You know. Maybe if you're a multiple abductee, but it will rarely be the norm in your life.
It's the outward. It's the edge of reality.
Yeah.
It's the edge of like, okay, what's normal anymore?
Yeah.
It's not what's your normalcy.
Yeah, exactly. Well, we're getting ready to hop back over to the next presentation. I want to thank you for taking some time out. You're always hopping over at these conferences. I always thank you taking time away from your table. Let everybody know where they can go to get their copy of Cryptids of the World, other than the Curious Realm store, where they can go to follow everything Ryan Edwards. Ryan?
Yes. Cryptids of the World is available in most bookstores. If you look on Barnes & Noble, Amazon.com, Half Price Books, wherever you guys can find books, can probably be there. If you're interested in me and my research, thecryptidchronicles.net. If you go there, you'll find my website where I have my events coming up. I have my podcast linked there as well. I know it has not been worked on recently, but I will try to get back to that, buddies. And then if you can find me on YouTube, if you look up the Cryptid Chronicles on YouTube, you'll find me and my podcast.
All right. Well, thanks as always for the time, my friend.
Oh, cool.
I always love seeing you here. I love your book, and I loved the presentation today. Fantastic job at your first crack at a presentation. That was very, very well done, man.
I think I did well.
You did great. While you are online checking out all the amazing work from Ryan Edwards, author of Cryptids of the World, make sure to stop on by Curious Realm. CuriousRealm.com is the website. It's where you can find all the episodes. That's where you can find our experiencer onboarding form. If you're an experiencer of the paranormal, cryptids, ghosts, if you're a targeted individual or government whistleblower, stop on by CuriousRealm.com/story. Share your story with us. Share your evidence. We will share it with our professionals and experts on the show. We are getting back to the conference right now. We're about to give away raffle tickets. Stay tuned right after this message for more interviews from the first annual Texas Monsters and Legends Conference right here in Cibolo, Texas, folks. We'll see you right after this.